And thank you very much for joining us once again here on PM Express. I have a very exciting conversation to have with a few friends on a very important matter. There is a group, a movement that has just been formed, in fact, and their idea is to break the duopoly of the NDC and the MPP, but it's anchored on constitutional review. A very fascinating take on a third force. We'll get into that very shortly. But as you know, this is the 10th year. A decade has passed since we invested so much money into the Constitutional Review Commission's work. Toured the country, pulled together your views on what we should do in improving our Constitution. 10 years on, we are counting the cost. Nothing has happened since all that investment was put in. And it's about to we need to have that conversation because a lot of people who are watching the Constitution, who believe in it, believe its time is critical, that we revisit that investment. And there's a movement that is currently putting its weight behind it. Some really formidable individuals are lending their shoulders to this wheel. We're going to be dissecting it. We have a two-part conversation, one today, maybe next week we'll have another one with the front, the faces on this particular one. So stay with me. A very interesting conversation about to unfold on this. But going back to this basic idea of the reviewing the Constitution, we know that they set up this Constitutional Review Commission in 2010 under Prof. Mills. May he so rest in perfect peace. And there were two main objectives. One, to move, one basic objective, to move the political constitution as we had it, or as we have it still, to one that is developmental in orientation. That is what they sought to do with the review. And you see how this is dovetailing into this movement that has been launched by a few prominent Ghanaians, right? And so what did they do? They put together about 90 recommendations, 90 things that we need to change about the Constitution, right? And they spent resources in doing this, $6 million in doing this. And by the way, this is according to my colleague Samson Ladayenini, who had done a lot of work on this matter, passionate about this, has written a lot of Samson's take on this, and he's very passionate. And I share that passion because if you spend $6 million on anything, you must see results. It should not be gathering dust on the shelves, as we've seen the Constitutional Review Commission report gather dust on the shelves. $6 million was spent into this. They went to 170 districts, over 57 sessions were held, the submissions, and many Ghanaians found time to write to them. 83,000 people putting submissions about things that they believe should change about 992 Constitution. So this is a lot of work, including what you think about what should happen to the Constitution. So when they crystallized all this, it came into blocks that our research desk put together for us. So election of MMDCEs is a major theme. You remember that this government attempted it. They went almost to the point of having a referendum to change it, and it backfired because politics got in the mess. Okay? We'll come to that. But most importantly, and this for me is one of those key points that keeps coming up, that is to establish a legally binding National Development Planning Commission. Is this wishful thinking, right? We'll be talking to the group, and the members believe this is an anchor provision that needs to change. But are we pursuing a wishful thinking here on this matter? Would it ever happen in a democracy where you have governments changing hands possibly, after every 4 years or at worst every 8 years? Is it really possible? You need this, some say, in an autocratic state where you have a Rwandan president, for example, Kagame, who can stay there for years and then he can push this agenda, but not tell me that you can do this in the democracy. That's a counter view. We'll put that to those who are behind this. MPs must not double as ministers is a key point that come up. Establishment of an independent public prosecutor. We have a special prosecutor. Those who are for this say what we have currently is very different from an independent public prosecutor. Totally different. We'll tell you why that is shortly. Now, we know some of the key recommendations. I've just clustered them for you. But if you look at them, appointment of majority of ministers from Parliament, the recommendation in essence was that give the president the free hand to appoint whoever he wants from wherever he wants. Don't tie him to appoint a majority from Parliament. This was accepted, by the way, by the white paper. And so why wasn't it implemented? A person appointed as Minister of Parliament may also retain his seat in Parliament. We also saw the decoupling of the positions of the Minister of Justice and Attorney General. This was also given, the President was given a free hand by discretion, right? If the President decides to do that. What we've seen is still a consolidation of those two positions. But then we have a special prosecutor who reports somewhat to the Attorney General. Many say this is not what we require to fix a problem. Now, mode of selecting metropolitan municipal chief executives. Another key thing that we know parties have toyed with, they promised in their manifestos to do and they haven't done. This current government is the only government that had really taken this seriously, almost to the point of actually having it and then pulling back because of political disagreements and a fear that it might not happen. Then we have the national interest movement, and this for me is key. The national interest movement. This is the movement I've just been talking about. They call themselves the NIM, right? The NIM movement. And they've come together, a few interested individuals behind this. And they're asking for a wide range of amendments in the Constitution, right? And it's very interesting. They want to provide for the establishment of the NDPC. They want this change. They want the NDPC and this National Development Plan quite grounded. Very important point for them. And the movement aims to rally support for an independent alternative to Ghana's electoral duopoly. That's what they're asking for. And they want to anchor this on an electoral constitutional reform. So now we're going to look at the review then. 10 years on, especially now that we're having a whole movement on the back of this, making these demands for constitutional reforms. You want to join me? Because it's been a while since we heard of him. Dr. Abu Sakara Foster, remember him? He was the CPP flag bearer once. Well, he is one of those leading the movement. A few very prominent Ghanaians are also in this movement. We'll talk about that shortly. We have some prominent lawyers also joining us to look at all this very important subject. Stay with me. Right after the break, all my guests will be on. And thank you for staying with us here on PM Express. And I'm delighted to be joined by a stellar group, a stellar names to have this conversation indeed. And this is one of those conversations that you need to pull out and must have because of we spend money on it already. But it has so much to do with our livelihoods, our survival as a people, but also our democracy. And so Martin Kpebu is a lawyer. Joins us via Zoom right now. Mr. Kpebu, thank you very much. A long time no talk. Nice to see you, and happy to always hear your voice on these very important national matters. Always exciting when I have you on my show. Guess who else is joining us? It's been several years since we heard his voice in the public space. Bodies agreed to talk to me tonight. Dr. Abu Sakara Foster is the founder of the National Interest Movement. And of course, the former CPP flag bearer. You know him. Hello, Doc.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, Doc. Great to have you join us. And
it's a pleasure.
I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this very important conversation. What about Dr. Charles Abugri? He's a chairman of the Economic Development Committee, National Interest Movement, and then former SADA boss also is joining us tonight on PM Express, as we dissect these matters. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time on PM Express. I want to start with you, Dr. Foster, because I read the National Interest Movement, what your ambitions and goals. You sound very optimistic about the reviewing the Constitution. In fact, you anchor Ghana's development on that, the necessity to review it. But I challenge you. We've had these two giants of MPP NDC in power since 2010, when we spent all the money I just illustrated on to gather people's views on a constitutional review, and they haven't touched it. Where is your optimism, coming from, and that drive that you believe that Ghanaians will anchor around this movement to force through some of these review and reforms of the Constitution that you champion?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for doing an excellent background work, because then it also makes life a bit easier for us to see where we're coming from. I think it is now going to be 30 years next year under the Fourth Republic. And during this period, we've now had a chance to assess our democracy. We've seen what it has become, a duopoly. And also, we have had a chance to reflect since 10 years ago when the CRC was first commissioned to begin this national conversation about the need for a constitutional review. But we are particularly concerned with reforms, and the reforms derive from both the constitutional review and those things which other CSOs have brought to the table. And what we are saying is that going forward, if we don't see these reforms in our democracy to redefine our democracy so it is more responsive to the people, what will happen over time is that it will become stagnant and lose its relevance. And as a consequence of that, the frustrations of the young people will build up, and the usual thing that we know happens elsewhere will happen. We are not immune to that. So what we are saying is that let's preempt the situation. Let us begin to press forward for a national conversation on some of these fundamental reforms that will shape the society in the way that we would like it to be. Now, you and I know that when the Constitution was made in 1992, it's a very different Ghana to the kind of Ghana we have today. And it was responding to a very different situation. It was merely to get us from the clutches of military rule into civilian rule. And it's done that. And we thank the people who went about it. It's done that, served that purpose. Now it is time for us to focus on the acceleration of development and remove those impediments which we have come to see every day exist in our body politic. One, the excessive powers of the president. Two, the attempt to dissuade and distract our development with manifestos instead of focusing on a particular national direction and building on that from season to season, year to year, election to election. If we say that our competitors who are like Korea and Singapore, etc., have gone ahead of us, why have they gone ahead of us? Let's stop and take a look at that. Are you with me? There are fundamental reasons. We are not immune to the laws of society, neither are we immune to the laws of physics.
You cite the examples of Singapore. I'll come to that because there's a fundamental challenge I'll throw to you about the National Development Planning Commission and which you said reforms should happen and whether it's wishful thinking. But still, I'll return to that conversation shortly. But let me bring in lawyer Martin Kpebu. Martin, I mean, you are a lawyer. We all were in this country when we spent all the money on Constitutional Review Commission's report, that put all that. It's been 10 years has come since that happened. It's been gathering dust on the shelf. First, give me your quick reaction to how we've treated that essential document when people invested, traveled across the country, spoke to thousands and thousands of Ghanaians and put together that document. Government accepted some, rejected some. Even for those they accepted, never touched it.
Yeah, so in one word, it's been disappointing. Yes, because you would find that even in the second term of the previous administration, that's to say the NDC administration, one would have thought that perhaps they would have begun implementation. But, I mean, wholesale, based on the government white paper. But to be fair to the administration, Professor Kweku Asari went to court. Yes, so it kind of placed an injunction on the whole process. But at that time, I thought that, well, we didn't see it openly. I thought that perhaps government could have reached out to him to see if there could have been some like middle of the road, a compromise, a settlement, sort of, but we didn't see it. And then next thing we knew, a new administration comes in. There were promises. I think the president, Nana Addo Dankwa, had promised to implement some of the recommendations, especially with respect to the election of the DCs. He tried, but it didn't go the way he wanted it. Then he pulled the brakes. So when you put all together, you come to an inescapable conclusion that we have not done well. It's been disappointing, to put it mildly. But all is not lost. You know, things like this require a lot of energy, a lot of agitation, so to call it. We'll have to keep shouting, you know, because, you know, Dr. Abu Sakara puts the nail on the head. The whole thing, or the biggest problem with our constitution, is the over-concentration of power in the hands of the president. That's
Isn't that also why it is really unrealistic to expect that anything will change? You want the president to give up some of his powers. Why would he do that? Isn't that why none of them had done it since 2010 when we spent all the money on it?
Well, they cannot resist it for long. No, the days are numbered. You see, our society is changed. So it doesn't really matter. It's not going to be on partisan lines. You see, people can feel it. You talk to people, you know, the hardships they are feeling and everything, and then they all see that, oh, okay, so it's possible we can have a better society if we can share this power. Right now, the power is concentrated in one man's hands, and that's not how we are socialized. I mean, you set up from the chief's palace, you see that the chief has his elders. Generally, we're a communal society. We set up a democracy in such a way that power goes to one party, winner takes all, and then the rest are left languishing. That's not a reflection of our communal society. So very soon, the president will have to listen, and that's how you've started. But let's not forget, the constitution itself didn't come cheap. No, it took a lot of agitation. You remember the speech by Professor Edubuahin talking about the culture of silence. Then Arnold Quinu responded saying that if Edubuahin didn't stop, next time there would not only be fire, but there would be an inferno, a conflagration, right? That was the word he used. So, you know, it caused a lot of excitement those days, where he said not just fire, there will be an inferno, a conflagration, right? And so on and so forth. Then National Commission National Commission on Democracy had to go around the country, soliciting views on the constitution, and so on and so forth. So what I'm saying is that this document didn't come cheap. It took a lot of agitation. It took a lot of demonstrations and complaints before we got it. So in the same way, if we want to change it radically, it's going to take the same kind of agitations and complaints, you know, and demonstrations.
Yeah, okay. So let me bring in Dr. Charles Abogri. Doc, do you ascribe, and you're also with the movement, the NIM movement, do you ascribe to the view Martin Kpebu just expressed there, that to do this, a more radical approach is required than what we've seen over the last decade or two? And is that the kind of approach that the national interest movement seeks to take?
National interest movement believes that a conversation can be had across the country to take a slightly more orderly look at where we have come from, where we have arrived, and what needs to be changed.
But haven't we done that already? Haven't you done already with the Review Commission's work?
Well, so the Commission has done this, put forward a number of modest reforms. We've actually walked backwards in many respects. The country is deteriorating as a result in many ways. And I think what the national interest movement is saying, let's take a pause and get back to a serious conversation about the changes that need to happen to put our constitutional aspirations for a republic that creates opportunities for all and creates an economy that is competitive in the world. When that fails, what I understand Martin Kpebu to be saying is that when that call for an orderly conversation fails, it is almost certain that the conversation will be had and the hands will be forced, because the consequences of not taking a deep look at where we are as a country with inequalities rising, unemployment growing, a demography that is basically, putting forward lots of young people into the next 2 or 3 decades, with an economy that is now basically reliant on, a very, let me use a hard word, that the Constitution has basically created an authoritarian presidency that then decides to share whatever crumbs that can come from the table, to a teeming youth, and exacerbating this duopoly. So this authoritarian president is succeeded by another authoritarian president because the Constitution creates an authoritarian presidency. So the point is this: the situation has reached a point that an orderly conversation needs to be had about what needs to be fundamentally changed in the way we are governed, in the way that our economy is governed, so that we can put ourselves back on track to achieve the aspirations of our founding fathers and mothers. I think that's what the national interest movement is asking.
Okay. I mean, well, I hear you, but let me put to you that we've had these orderly conversations for at least 10 years, following the National Constitutional Review Commission. They toured the country, held sessions. What more orderly conversation would we require now to force any action?
No, that has been torpedoed. It was torpedoed when the attempt to even make modest reforms were halted in court, and since then, no conversations have happened. I was in Kenya. I was then working for the UN when the Constitutional Review Commission came to Kenya. It arrived in Kenya at a time that Kenyans were very euphoric about their own constitution. They had basically emerged from several decades of authoritarian rule. Unlike Ghana and its 1992 constitution, would set about bringing about a constitution that would liberate its people. They were lucky that they drew their immediate lessons and experiences from South Africa, that was seeking a more participatory constitution. And that's what they arrived. When they came, our conversations were, we now must move from simply building the mechanics of democracy to building the foundations of a transformational economy.
You're talking about Kenya, correct?
I'm talking about Kenya.
But that was born out of conflict and violence and bloodshed.
Exactly. And so they have reformed the economy in a certain way. Our constitution was also born to some extent out of bloodshed and tensions, as Martin Pebu just reminded us. Every constitution lives to a point where it has to take a second look at itself to go the next journey. What NIM is saying is that it's time to take a look, and we have set out the things that we think can fundamentally change. And that the main purpose of changes is to bring about a system of governing that is not dependent on two parties, that basically change the goal, the baton between themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
with nothing fundamentally changing. And every round of the baton change actually creates a worse situation for the country, driving it increasingly into the abyss. Yeah, now, we either have this conversation orderly, or that the situation, the objective situation, will force us to have that conversation disorderly.
Explain that.
The point that Dr. Sakara said was this, that elsewhere in the world, we have seen what happens when the people are frustrated to a point, when they feel that their voices no more matter, when their existential needs drive them to a point where, in the end, the streets. These are the foundations of the various springs that we have heard about. We don't necessarily want that. We want a process of reform that allows people to contribute in an orderly manner, that allows us to take a deep look at ourselves and the journey we have traveled to date and the path we ought to travel next in a manner that gives everybody a fair chance in life.
Okay. Let me bring Dr. Foster. Doc, I just heard Dr. Bugre, in fact, yourself suggest that our constitution has created a dictatorship. I mean, two parties, people. But isn't that what we need to really develop? In fact, it was you who mentioned Singapore. You mentioned Singapore, and you related to National Development Plan, one plan that everybody buys into, and you want the constitution reformed and reviewed so we can have this law that binds all parties to one particular plan. But I put it to you that what you seek, which the Constitutional Review Commission had found and had articulated, hasn't gotten off the ground because it's simply not realistic in a democracy like ours. You say, just a second. You say Singapore. Singapore had one man, strong man at the helm, from 1959 to 1990. That is the way. That's how they did it. I mean, we changed our government 4 years, maximum 8 years. What you asked for is simply not possible under the current circumstance of a democracy.
Well, I think our fanciful view of democracy is what is the problem. Because at the end of the day, that democracy is to facilitate the development that creates better conditions for everybody to live in. It is not just for the purpose of having elections, having positions, and sharing the booty. That's not what it is about. So if we have this purposefulness to democracy, then we need to look at our conditions and then look at what other people did and say, okay, we recognize we have a democracy, the parties are will change, and governments will change. But what is it about those people that enable them to develop continuity, consistency?
Because they had one man in power for 30 years.
Yes, focus. Well, you don't necessarily have to have that, but if you entrench your constitution and you have 6-year segments and you take your manifestos from the constitution, then you can have the continuity. You can have the focus.
Did you say 6 years? Is that what you want? Because you have 4 years.
You will digress from the topic at hand. Let's just say we have suggested that, but let's just say for the moment, the point we're trying to make fundamentally is that if you have a national development plan entrenched in the constitution for whatever segments of government you want, when a new administration comes, there are clear targets that are set in terms of transforming the country over a certain segment of a period. What is up to you now is to tell us, given our resources, how you will manage those resources to achieve those targets.
Can I put it to you? Can I put to you, Doctor?
Excuse me. In that way, you are able to build cumulatively. We don't have a situation where manifestos supersede a national development plan. And that means that essentially you have no direction, and every government that comes chooses to go its own direction. Surely it is clear and evident to you that you cannot have as much progress going forward as those who build cumulatively. And let me put this to you. What you call democracy today is not how democracy started. When Cromwell took over, he was a dictator for several years. Even in the US, which you like to celebrate, when they formed their constitution, it was at the point of a gun. And what every student of history must realize is that nations in their formative stages are like the welding of a sword. You have to put the stones in the furnace, melt them, mold them, hammer them, and then it becomes a sword that cannot break. But if you simply just put them together, put a flag over it and call it whatever you want to call it, and it doesn't go through that process, then you won't have that transformation that it can achieve. And that is really the argument that we are making, that there's some fundamental things that we cannot avoid. And we have increasingly a maturing political population. Don't think that the same quiet youth that you and others of your age have been are the same ones that are going to come in the next 10, 15 years. It's not going to be like that. You understand me? And at that point, it may be too late. So what we are saying is, let's look at this preemptively. We are not a nation in isolation where we put a hood over our heads and think that we have a very nice, cushy democracy. Let's keep on doing our duopoly forever and ever. No, you're living in a global world. Look around you. Things that have happened elsewhere can happen to you. But the advantage you have of experience of the last 30 years and others who have traveled around the world, who have the foresight to see how things can be, is to try to preempt that.
Okay.
Is to try to circumvent that. And that is basically what we are saying. Let us put aside this idea that because it is a democracy, those things can't happen. They have happened, they can happen, and at certain stages of a nation's development, they're crucial.
Yeah, let me bring in Martin. Martin, just clear this up for me. So you referenced at the beginning this case at the Supreme Court that I think Dr. Professor Kwikwaza had taken.
Sorry.
Yes. What's the status of that? Is that what is holding up the implementation? Just clarify that for me.
No. After the Supreme Court gave the decision where they said the Constitutional Review Commission process was legal, it was constitutional, that was it. So there was actually, before he went to court, there was an implementation committee that was set up. And then, but because of the court action, that committee kind of went silent. But when President Akufo-Addo took over, he also promised to get on with it.
Yes.
And you remember the attempt to have the DCs elected, which failed.
Yes.
Yes. And then since then, there's not been much.
Yeah. I mean, so again, you just hit the nail on the head for me. One of the critical pillars of the Constitutional Review Commission's report was that have MMDCs elected. Now, this president, and credit to him, took it, and this was going to reduce his own powers, right? I mean, and I raised that thing about the politician, but if he had gone through, his powers would have significantly gone away, right? And yet he tried it. But the most important thing, nearly it's not good enough. It failed. Yeah. Fundamentally because politics, NDC jumped onto a different ship, MPP, and then it didn't happen. Chances are we might never get this close again. Isn't that the reality we need to face? That so far as we have these two parties in place, what we are asking for will simply not happen?
Well, to a certain extent, you are right, but there is also, we have to reserve some space for public opinion. Listen, you can never totally, estimate public opinion. It has a life of its own. And you can see it happening in Ghana. You see what happened in the last election. I mean, truthfully, who thought John Mahama was going to do very well? I mean, the extent, 47% in just 4 years. This was the man we had demonized 4 years earlier and thought that he was done. He was finished in Ghanaian politics. 4 years later, he rebounded. He rose from the ashes like a phoenix. And now we don't even know where he's headed tomorrow. You can see. So for public opinion, trust me, no politician has a handle on it. And I see throughout, thanks to the free SHS, more of our citizens are getting educated, more of them can read and write, and that's good. The president, he's done extremely well with the free SHS. And so the country is transforming, at least when it comes to education. Once citizens can read and write, trust me, Evans, we are going to force these politicians to change this constitution.
How?
Yeah, through the agitations, because citizens will express disquiet. And that's why I said you saw it in the votes that John Mahama got in the last election. That's the way I understand it.
But let me ask you, why do you think that it is only through constitutional change, constitutional reform, that which you ask for will happen? Because the Constitution is replete already with a lot of good things that we haven't implemented. And I again put it to you that the directive principles of state policy has all the fantastic milk and honey policies that we need to implement. Nobody's touching it. Well, so why do we believe another reform will somehow fix another wording, changing the wording in a book with ink?
Yes. So
will all of a sudden change anything?
What's the differences I see so far? When you look into the Constitution, Article 58 and then Article 70, you see that everything ends up on the desk of the president. So we want to unbundle that power. Citizens are saying that, look, there's just too much power in the hands of one man. So if we can have the Constitution amended, okay, in such a way that the president alone doesn't exercise all these powers, then that would be a shot in the arm. That would be a good way to start. So that once the power is devolved, at least, so you're looking at the ministerial powers, okay? You're looking at the Article 70, the administrators of the various funds and all that. Okay, the Article 70 people, that's the appointment, Article 70 power of appointment, and so on and so forth. So it's going to bring further freedom because right now, because it's the president who exercises all that power, there's a lot of incentives for MPs, even in parliament. We all know, look, Evans, let's not play ostrich. If you become a minister today, look, Evans, your life is going to change. You don't even need to be corrupt. What the contractors will bring you is so much money. So I like the way Professor Kufi Abuchi put it today in the morning on the Joy SMS show, okay? That parliament is like a transit point for a lot of the MPs. That's to say, he gets into parliament only with the intention to become a minister, okay? Because the freebies, the perks and all that, there's so much. The price is oversized. It's oversized. So if we take away this power that the president alone should not exercise all of that, let's have a part of it being proportional representation. That in itself is going to reduce the tension in the system. The winner takes all. And also we will increase the accountability. Right now, you see that it's only the president who can, what do you call it, fire a minister. You see all the bad things that Kweku Agyeman did. We've railed and railed, and the president will have none of it.
But is that constitutionally accurate? Can Parliament also pass a vote of censure on the minister?
Yeah, so that is the article, is that 82? Yeah. They may pass a vote of censure. Evans, I think the public uproar that we experienced with the rot, with the, bad governance that Kweku Agyeman took us through, that public uproar is even stronger than a vote of censure from Parliament. Yet so far, the president hasn't moved an inch. So that tells you that no, we need to do something. Elsewhere, Agyeman would have left the instant this news, his malfeasance became public. But the president is quiet. So you see that we've suffered a dip in our democracy with this particular story. It's thrown us in a lot of bad light, very, very bad light. We've sunk so low. Every day I wake up, I'm like, wow, this thing, is this still real? That Agyeman is still in office, and His Excellency the President is also still in office. And before he came into power, we're told that, hey, this man, he's no nonsense. This man, he's no nonsense. He's ruthless. He's not like John Mahama. And now when I look at him, I'm like, the man is spent. He's totally spent. Otherwise, Agyeman shouldn't be in office. You say, yeah, so it tells you that, look, we need a new system altogether. We'll widen it, that the president alone shouldn't exercise such powers. It's even, you see, what we even did in this constitution doesn't follow our cultural and our societal socialization. Don't we say in Key that a tobacco enko ejina? Is that also how it's stated, all right? Or even they would tell you that one man alone cannot embrace a baobab tree. Have you seen it? Mm-hmm. So if one man alone doesn't have all the knowledge, why do you give all the powers of appointment to one man? Then you make a very weak council of state. You don't get a strong council of state, so they can't really hold the president accountable. The same for parliament. When all the people in the president's party, really, that's the parliamentarians, are looking forward to ministerial appointments to board and the rest, because times are hard. You're looking for bottom line, what goes into the packet. You say, so the incentives have been arranged in such a way that the president holds practically all of the power. Even those in opposition. If a minister, I remember the shambolic performance by some of the nominee ministers. And I'm sure you heard some things in the air as to how those people were passed, how they got the votes, you see. Well, I don't want to go too much into it,
well, listen.
But ways and means, the ways and means, you see. Yes, because people in opposition are really struggling. So when there is ways and means, there's opportunity to make life better for them. They will look the other way and pass ministers who don't even do well at the vetting. You see, so look, this constitution is not taking us anywhere. We really need to do something about it, something very radical.
So I'm going to take a break. When I return, so we now have a whole movement with its sole purpose being getting the reforms done, right? Which is the NIM movement. When we return, I'll talk to Dr. Abusakara Foster and also talk to Charles Abugri. So they should tell us, in what clear ways are they going to go about achieving the objectives? In what specific clear ways are they going to be? Because again, many have tried and failed. And I can cite a countless examples recently. So how are they intending to succeed where many, many others have failed? Stay with me. My guest joining me all on Zoom is Martin Kpebu. He's a lawyer, also is Dr. Abusakara Foster, is the founder of the National Interest Movement and former CPP flag bearer. We'll need to have a sit down with him for a one-on-one on this movement so we can interrogate a bit more. Also is Dr. Charles Abugri, is the chairman of the Economic Development Committee of the National Interest Movement and former SADA boss also. Dr. Foster, let me ask you, I think we've, in the last hour, laid out what the challenges are and what we need to do. So let me ask you, so how does the National Interest Movement plan to do it? Specifically, we don't have too much time, but break it down for me in bullets. What do you plan to do?
I think the first point is that the Constitution, the power of the Constitution is in the people. It is not in the president. It is not in the parliamentarians. It is in the people. And it says so. So our issue here is to go back to the people, as we are doing constituency by constituency, to collect signatures. We're collecting 4,000 signatures per constituency and submit that to their member of parliament with an endorsement for these constitutional reforms, asking their member of parliament to ensure that they table these conversations in parliament. We have already submitted it to the speaker, but we know that that path may not yield those results. We chose deliberately not to submit it to the executive because we didn't want it to be a one-sided affair. We thought by submitting it to the speaker, they can call both sides of the house. Let's look at these reforms. You champion some, you also champion some. 137, 137. We can't get 60% agreement anyway without our coalition, cooperation. So in that way, both could have got credit for changing the Constitution without one side taking all the glory. If that is not going to happen, then we have to tackle them constituency by constituency, as we're doing now. As I speak to you, we have already collected signatures. We're still collecting signatures. And 4,000 signatures per constituency is going to give us 1.1 million signatures. Now, somebody may say, well, 1.1 million signatures, there's 10 million votes. So it's still not enough. Well, if you are a student of Ghana politics, you will know that only 25 to 30 constituencies tip the election. And in those 25 to 30 constituencies, even 1,000 votes can make the difference. So this is a big thing. And if your MP, as an MP, your people have come to you, table these 4,000 signatures, told you to table these motions in Parliament, and you have not even said a word about it, what do you have to say to them in 2024? To send you back there again? Who sent you there in the first place? They sent you there. So this is the time now when Ghanaians, we are asking Ghanaians, wake up, stop complaining about politicians. You sent them there. There's a job for them that you want them to do. This particular job is paper job. It doesn't require so much money. Are you with me? It just requires you to surrender some of your powers and to make sure that the check systems in the state work. Now, when we say surrender powers, we're not saying that you should take all the powers from the president. Far from it. In fact, in some cases, we want to give the president more powers. We don't want anybody forcing the president's hand as to where he gets his ministers from. He can get them wherever he wants to get them from, except that they shouldn't be from parliament. Are you with me?
Okay.
But on the other hand, we do not want the influence of the executive on the supposedly independent body,
so
like the Electoral Commission, like this Shiraj. So in those particular cases, we're saying that a different mechanism, a stronger Council of State, more independent, needs to appoint those people.
Doc, I can assure you that this is a conversation that we just began. We need to return to this because there's so much more to interrogate. Martin Kpebu, always a delight hearing your thoughts on these matters. Dr. Charles Abugri, our paths will cross again on this. I'm pretty sure of this. Dr. Abu Sakara Foss, I need to be sitting down with you and interrogating these ideas of yours a bit more. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your evening. Also, you too. I'll be back tomorrow with another edition of PM Express.
My name is Kujo Yankson. Let me tell you how to turn back time. You can now bring back all the fun, all the excitement, all the controversy of the Super Morning Show and all your favorite Joy shows when you go to myjoyonline.com/podcasts. Just select your favorite show and bring it all back again. Joy 99.7 FM, radio for discerning listeners.
It's radio. Joy 99.7.
Good morning and welcome to News File.